What's up, everyone? Welcome to the video. We are here breaking down this Week 14 NFL DFS slate on DraftKings and FanDuel. And if this is your first time here on the channel, what we do in these videos, we go position by position with the player pool that I have interest in. As of right now on Friday morning, we'll put a single entry lineup build as we progress through it on DraftKings, and then I'll run the optimizer at the end to see who's popping the most as of right now with the ownership and projections I have currently in place on Friday. And I will tell you right now, last week was one of the more fun slates of the season for me. I thought there was a lot of fun ways to go about it. We had 3 games over a 50-point over-under. This week, only one such game, and that's Detroit versus Minnesota. And some of the plays that were in extremely good spots last week are in good spots once again, but the prices are higher. You no longer have the free square of Samaje Perine with Joe Mixon being out. And there's really not many like completely standout chalk plays. Like, there's good chalk plays, but they're not as standout as I thought they were last weekend, which always does lead to some more interesting builds because everyone's a little bit more spread out. Obviously, injury news could change that throughout the weekend, but as of right now, I think we're looking at a pretty wide open slate, which I think makes it very fun for building tournament lineups. And as always, we will start with the quarterback position. And I do have to mention, if you want access to the sheets, the projections, all the data you'd ever need, color coded nice and neat, so it's quite easy to follow. Links down below in the description or in the pinned comment for that. Also have an optimizer, ownership projections, cheat sheets with designates cash games, tournament plays, and things like that. Like I said, you know where to find it, and I do cover the NBA each and every single day in a similar fashion in baseball and NASCAR once those seasons start once again. But anyway, let's talk some quarterbacks here. And to be honest, not a great quarterback slate. I'm not even sure I like Jalen Hurts that much, but I just wanted to talk about him a little bit because of how well he played last week. I just wanted to mention that he did close the gap in the MVP race. I still personally think it's Patrick Mahomes, and unless he gets hurt, I think it's going to be a hard time knocking him off his throne. He's just been incredible this year. Not saying Jalen Hurts hasn't been great. Tua's been good. Joe Burrow's been very good. Josh Allen definitely fading away a little bit. But man, Hurts had a great game last week, closed the gap. I want to say it was, for the week, I want to say Patrick Mahomes was like minus 160 to win it, and then Jalen Hurts was in like the 600, 800 range. Now it's like 200, 300. Jalen Hurts definitely closed the gap there. He's playing phenomenal. Great week last week versus Tennessee. Not sure he's going to replicate that this weekend versus the Giants, but with his floor and ceiling combination is unmatched by just almost anybody. I mean, Josh Allen's kind of there with him because of the rushing upside, but Hurts has just been so good. He's been throwing the ball a lot better in seasons past. Obviously, A.J. Brown's been huge for this offense. I mean, you got A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith to get the ball to, Dallas Goedert. Not sure he's going to play this week, but he's kind of getting close to returning, so we'll see what happens there. I personally want to save some money at quarterback this week, but if you have the money for Hurts, I'm not going to talk you off of him. Joe Burrow, $7,000. I play 3 max and 5 max every single week on DraftKings, sometimes on FanDuel. And I'll tell you right now, I promise I will 100% have a Joe Burrow Bengals stack ran back with either Amari Cooper or Donovan Peoples-Jones. That's just the way it's going to go. Maybe David Njoku. We'll see. But I'm telling you right now, I will have Joe Burrow. I love this spot versus Cleveland at home. And I know the Bengals always seem to have the Browns seem to have Joe Burrow's number. He just can't beat the Browns. So we'll see what happens. But they don't have to win for him to have a good fantasy output. And 26-point implied team total for the Bengals here, 5.5-point spread in the Bengals' favor. And Burrow's just been awesome this year, kind of getting closer in the MVP race as well. Nearly 300 passing yards per game, over 2 passing touchdowns. Started the season off a little shaky with all those picks versus Pittsburgh, but got Jamar Chase back last week. He looked very good, played over 80% of the snaps. I want to say had 9 targets, close to 100 yards, and that's going to be huge for Joe Burrow and his ceiling because, I mean, Jamar Chase can make mediocre plays into touchdowns. Like, the guy's absolutely phenomenal, one of the best wide receivers in the game. And the Browns defense obviously has not been very good this season. And then we get into some of the cheaper quarterbacks, which we'll start with this Minnesota-Detroit game with Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff. I think both guys are fine. If it's a primetime game, stay far away from Kirk Cousins. But if it's in the afternoon and a dome, typically plays pretty well. And this is the best matchup you can give for a quarterback because Detroit's giving up the most points per game to the quarterback position this year. It's just, I hate playing Kirk Cousins. This is boring to do. But the same can be said for Jared Goff, but he's $500 cheaper, and I like the Detroit lines a little bit better, and I'm using a lot of Amon-Ra St. Brown, so I'd rather get him because it just pairs with my wide receiver. So both guys are fine. They're very similar plays. Their stats this season are actually pretty close to each other, but the Lions play pretty well at home. They can put up some points. So Jared Goff, $5,600. Looks like he might be the most popular quarterback this week. I think my projections currently have that being the case right now. And then I want to say it's Joe Burrow, Kirk Cousins as far as ownership projections are concerned. So I like all 3 a lot. Those are my 3 favorite quarterbacks. But if I had to pick one as my favorite, it would be Jared Goff. And the Vikings defense has not been scary whatsoever this year. And it's very easy to stack this game up. If you're using Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown ran back with either Justin Jefferson or Adam Thielen. You can also throw in DeAndre Swift in there as well. And if it looks like I'm crying, I'm not. Something's in my throat. It's making my eyes water a little bit. So hopefully I'm not crying here. I know talking about Jared Goff and Kirk Cousins is the most exciting thing in the world, but anyway, we have Tyler Huntley here, $5,500. Lamar is not officially out, but he's not practiced. So I think it's safe to say he's not going to play in this game. And if you're looking for the Walmart version of Jalen Hurts, Tyler Huntley kind of fits the build there, $5,500. He's not a prolific passer. Jalen Hurts is definitely better than Tyler Huntley. I'm not trying to compare the two. I'm just saying they have like a similar skill set where Huntley can run the ball a lot. And while he's not quite the passer Jalen Hurts is, he doesn't really have the weapons of A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. He still has Mark Andrews to get the ball too, but he's also about $3,000 cheaper, so please keep that in mind. But had 10 carries last weekend filling in for Lamar Jackson. If you can get you 10-plus carries and maybe like 200 yards passing with a couple of touchdowns mixed in, whether it's on the ground or through the air, $5,500, you don't need much. I think the floor is decently high versus a Pittsburgh team that has not been good defensively versus quarterbacks this season. And moving over to our lineup, a few quarterbacks we could talk about here to plug in, which we already did. But I think my favorite one this week is going to be Jared Goff. I played him last week, and he was much lower owned than what he's going to be this week. So I was just a little bit ahead of the train there. Unfortunately, going to be pretty high owned this week. So I still like him, though. Very similar spot as last weekend versus Jacksonville. And obviously getting Jameson Williams back, which obviously coming back from a pretty bad injury, you can't really expect him to make much of an impact. But he did play 11% of the snaps last week. Didn't do anything, but if we can see those ramped up, I mean, that's just a positive for Jared Goff because he does have some solid weapons to get the ball to. Both teams played at a pretty fast pace, so like in Goff, I already talked about this, but just kind of reiterating the point. And moving on to running backs, this position is brutal this week. I believe it was last week where we had just many good options. I was having a hard time choosing which ones I liked. This week, I'm kind of having a hard time finding ones I do like at all. A couple of these guys I just put on here for the sake of having some discussion. But yeah, not pretty. Although I mean, we have expensive, mid-range, and cheap here, depending on which kind of roster construction you were looking at. Derrick Henry's price point did stand out below 8K. Good matchup versus Jacksonville. Does have a pretty good history versus them. It means nothing. I hate people that bring up just past matchups versus players that aren't even on the same team anymore. But I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, we don't have much to talk about. And I think we all remember that one game where he had like 200 yards and 4 touchdowns with the 99-yard touchdown versus Jacksonville in primetime. Obviously not expecting that, but better spot here than versus Philly because, you know, Titans versus Philly just did not look great this week. I'm not last week. And they fell behind. And, you know, when Titans fall behind, you can't really do much with Henry because he's not a prolific pass catcher. But 3.5-point favorite at home here versus Jacksonville. And Henry's going to get the volume, probably going to get you 20-plus touches. Probably going to fall into the end zone once or twice. Probably going to be around 100 yards if that's the case. Well, $700, that's not bad at all. It's just the floor is not as high as some of these other guys because he doesn't really catch passes. And that 23 receiving yards per game is really beefed up by that one like 70-yard catch he had a couple of weeks ago. Outside of that, not a guy you can really count on in the passing game. So if you're playing Henry, you're counting on touchdowns, which not usually a bad thing for him. Dalvin Cook, everyone's going to be enamored with the passing attack on both sides here. Everyone likes Cousins, Jefferson, Thielen. Everyone likes Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, DeAndre Swift. You can try to throw him in the passing game too, and even TJ Hawkinson. But I don't think a lot of people are going to play Dalvin Cook, and it's a pretty good spot. I mean, Detroit's like 20-50 versus the run this season. They're not giving up too many points per game fantasy-wise to running backs, but that's just because they're bleeding points versus quarterbacks in the past. I still think this is a beatable matchup. They just don't really give up too much to the air versus running backs. But if Cook can get you 15, 20 touches, I think there's a good chance he probably has a pretty good game versus Detroit at lower ownership than his counterparts. And then we're getting into probably the two most popular running backs for cash this week, Joe Mixon and Tony Pollard. And it feels weird to say that. Obviously, Mixon's fine because he just had a concussion. I want to undermine that. It's obviously very serious. But as far as returning from an injury, it's not like it's a hammy issue or a calf strain or anything like that. So it should be good to go. And the coaches did say he's going to be the number one, even though Samaje Perine did play pretty well, was heavily involved in the passing game, which was nice. But if we can get Mixon at 15-plus touches versus the Cleveland Browns defense below 7K, I'll take that. They've been so bad versus the run this year, looking, exactly 31st year versus the run, and giving the 4th most points per game to the position, and Mixon on the season averaging just about 20 total touches or 20 total opportunities per game. He's not been efficient this season, below 4 yards per carry. I do think Samaje Perine is going to get mixed in more than he was in weeks prior. It's kind of like a 70-30 split for the most part. Maybe we see that be 60-40, something like that. Maybe, hopefully we don't see more because I'm going to play a lot of Joe Mixon. But yeah, $1,600, great matchup versus the Browns and their 5.5-point favorites. I think he makes a lot of sense. Tony Pollard, $6,700. Feels weird kind of liking him for cash games and nearly $7,000 with Zeke back, but there's just not that many great options, and the guy is great. I think in PPR this season, he's 9th in running back points. Like, the guy's just been legit good. They have a 31-point implied team total, which is the highest on the slate. 17.5-point favorites at home versus the Texans, who have just one of the absolute worst run defenses in the NFL, giving up nearly 150 rushing yards per game, and the 5th worst DVA-wise versus the run. So he does split the work with Zeke. Zeke is typically will outsnap him, but I think they complement each other very well, and Pollard's obviously the more dynamic back. Only concern here is that they just get up so big that they pull starters in the second half. But even then, if they do blow them out, I mean, these guys had to have scored some points, so it'll be fine. DeAndre Swift, it feels like a better tournament play, but even in cash this week, I think you can get away with him. He saw 51% of the snaps this week, which is his most since week 8. And also got a goal line carry for a touchdown last week. We still saw Jamal Williams get one, which, you know, he's got to be the main goal line back. But Swift's more involved in the passing game. This game should be pretty back and forth, and he does correlate fine with Jared Goff, so I don't mind DeAndre Swift at all. Isaiah Pacheco, $5,700. If you're playing him, you were counting on a touchdown, but he's a 9.5-point favorite on pretty much the best offense in the NFL, so I think the chances of him scoring a touchdown are pretty good. But if he does not score, just know you're kind of capped at like 7 to 8 points unless he gets his 100-yard bonus at 13 points, because he's not going to really catch many passes. Did see 2 targets last week, which was nice, but Jerick McKinnon largely plays that role. About pretty much splits the snaps, like a 50, 40, 60, 40 split for the most part. So I like him. It's just the lack of pass catching does limit his upside. And Latavius Murray, $5,200. This feels really gross. The opposite side of this game, 9.5-point dog. And we saw snaps dip from 80% to 60% last week with Mike Boone returning, and they did say they want to get Mike Boone even more involved, so it's obviously going to hurt Latavius Murray, but you have to assume he's going to get the goal line carries if they can get to the goal line. Obviously kind of hard to trust Russell Wilson these days, but $5,200, if you're looking for a guy that should see half the snaps at least and get the bulk of the work, he's your guy. It's not really a guy I want to be on too much. It's just he's cheap, and it falls into the end zone. He's a decent play. There's just no other good cheap running backs at all. And moving back over to our lineup, like I said, running back is just not that great this week. So I'm going to just plug in my 2 favorites as of right now. Joe Mixon at $6,900 and Tony Pollard at $67. Then we'll move on to the wide receivers, which hint, we have Jared Goff. So we're basically going to be locked in on Amon-Ra St. Brown. But we'll still talk about it first before we do it. And speaking of pass catchers, it really all comes down to, I say this every single time, but it's just the truth. It all comes down to who am I stacking, what quarterback am I using, what games am I looking at, game environments, or who's my run back options for those guys. So, for example, the first guy, Justin Jefferson, I'm probably not playing him alone. If I'm playing Jefferson, I probably have either Kirk Cousins tied to him, or he's my run back option with a Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown stack. Obviously, yeah, if you want to play him as a one-off, go for it, but it's a very expensive one-off at $9,000. He's obviously my wide receiver 1 projected on the week. Great spot versus Detroit. It's just a matter of being able to afford him. Let me pull up their target distributions this year, because that's probably a little bit more interesting to you than what teams they play on, because I'm sure you already know that. A.J. Brown, if you are using Jalen Hurts, you can play Hurts naked, but, I mean, it's been an unusually good idea to pair him up with A.J. Brown most weeks. The guy's been extremely good. 80 receiving yards per game, 7.5 targets. I've just been a complete alpha dog this year. And you can also look at Devonta Smith. He's at $6,300, and he has not had less than 8 targets in the past 4 weeks. So if you want to roll with either him or A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts stacks, I have no problem with that whatsoever. Just never really any good run back options on the Giants offense, unfortunately. If you're using Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, come on down. You're the top options. Hayden Hurst is doubtful for this game, so really it's going to be the Jamar Chase, T. Higgins show. Good spot versus Cleveland. They've been worse versus the run than they have been versus the pass. And it seems that the Bengals always struggle versus the Browns ever since Baker got drafted. Obviously, Baker's not there anymore, but shout out to Baker also. By the way, the game-winning drive last night, game-winning touchdown at the end with 10 seconds left to Van Jefferson. That was really cool to see. I'm a Browns fan, so just really nice to see that happen. Either way, I do like the stacks here, and like I said, I'm 100% playing Joe Burrow, so that means I'm 100% either playing one of, if not both, of Jamar Chase or T. Higgins this week. T. Higgins is questionable, but assuming he's going to be good to go. If you're playing cash games, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think he is personally going to be the highest owned player on the slate this week. That's what I have currently in the projections. That could change if there's some injury news or where there's going to be a cheap starting running back or something like that. But right now, I mean, St. Brown's projecting very well. I think projection-wise, let me check. I think he might just only be behind Justin. Yeah, out of all these guys, he's only behind Justin Jefferson. Like, I have him around 21 points. I mean, it's really hard not to like him this week. Good spot versus Minnesota. They've given up some points to wide receivers this year. And past 2 weeks, St. Brown has absolutely ate. Was great last week versus Jacksonville. Was great the week prior versus Buffalo. Going to be a high-scoring game, back and forth. And if you're using Jared Goff, he is your clear-cut option there. CeeDee Lamb, $7,500. He's a good play. I think he projects well for me. I have him very similar projected like Amon-Ra St. Brown. Problem is they're 17.5-point favorites. So I think they're going to put up points. I'm just concerned they're going to have to take off the gas in the second half. And if CeeDee Lamb doesn't have a big first half, well, we could certainly be in trouble. We could see one of those floor games. So that's my only concern there. But either way, it's a good spot if you can afford them. But I would prefer St. Brown, and I probably would prefer T. Higgins, if, assuming he's good to go. I already talked about those two guys. If you're stacking up the Bengals, Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, those are your obvious run back options. Cooper did land with a hip issue, I believe just on Wednesday or Thursday, which is a little bit concerning later on in the week. But if he's good to go, so on targets with Deshaun Watson, the chemistry did not look great. I know Peoples-Jones' fantasy output wasn't bad, but that's because he had a punt return touchdown. So that really beefed up the points a little bit, but those are your clear-cut run back options. Garrett Wilson, the price keeps coming up, but I'm going to keep playing him. If he doesn't have Zach Wilson throwing the football, that's all I can really ask for. Had a great game early in the year versus the Browns with Joe Flacco at quarterback, and 2 really good weeks back-to-back with Mike White, just the elite quarterback that White is. But, the talent's there. He's a first-round pick, highly touted from Ohio State, and he's looked really good. And Buffalo has been able to give us some points this season versus the wide receiver position. With them being 10-point dogs on the road, they're going to be throwing the ball quite a bit, I'd imagine. Both teams play at a pretty fast pace. So while the price keeps coming up, I'm going to keep playing him because the dude's a stud. I think he should be in the 6K range, maybe closer to 7K. DJ Moore, I'm not really excited about playing him, but he was popping a little bit in my optimizer, so at least early on in the week. A couple days ago before I updated last night, so I'm kind of excited to see if he is still popping. But, man, it's just the quarterback situation for DJ Moore, it's not been great this year. We've had Baker Mayfield, PJ Walker, Sam Darnold, just not pretty, but $5,500 for a talented wide receiver like he is, I think he's playable, but I'm not excited about it. Adam Thielen, should have grouped him in with Justin Jefferson, but if you can't quite afford him and you're looking to stack this game up, Adam Thielen's a great option at $4,100. Had a good game versus Detroit early in the season. It's really just all about getting more exposure to this game. And I think if you are playing cash games, he is viable, sitting close to 7 targets per game. Don't mind that at all. Already talked about Peoples-Jones, Kendall Hinton. So we're waiting on some Jerry Jeudy news. He is currently questionable. If he happens to miss, we know Courtland Sutton's doubtful. He'd be the wide receiver 1 in this offense, which I know is not a great offense to be the wide receiver 1 in. But at $3,400, it's hard not to take some interest because they're going to be trailing versus the Chiefs, and they're going to throw the ball quite a bit. And the Chiefs this year gave it the 5th most points per game in the wide receiver position, and they're also 26th DVOA versus the pass. So even if Jeudy does play, I still like him. He's going to be the wide receiver too. It'd really just be Jeudy, who's banged up, Kendall Hinton, and Greg Dulcich. That's really about it. Both teams played at somewhat decent pace there, so he'd be a fine punt play because there's no really good punt running backs this week. So it could add some extra flexibility to your lineup if need be. And heading back over to our lineup, it's pretty obvious. We have Jared Goff, so we're going to have to pair him up with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Price did come up, but definitely deserved. He's just been playing elite the past couple of weeks. And I think it's going to be kind of tough to afford Justin Jefferson unless we get some punt running backs in there. Like if we plug them in, there's only $3,500 left, which I know we can do because we can play Hinton, we can play a cheap defense, and obviously tight end flex is kind of open. So I'd like to play him. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to make it work. If we have to drop down to an Adam Thielen, I am fine with that. But let's leave him in for right now, and we'll see what happens. But if we have to drop the Thielen, we will do that, which would give us actually a lot more flexibility. But I would like to see if this can work possibly. And always the fun part, tight ends and defense is just always ugly each week. Although if you can afford Travis Kelce, go for it. Obviously the top option, but I don't really want to target this game too much. I would not be surprised if Mahomes has 300 plus yards, 3 or 4 touchdowns, and Kelce has a good game. It's just I'm looking for a better game environment, and even if they do go off, they're gonna be pretty low owned. I think in my 3 max, 5 max, whatever it may be, or I don't think it'll kill me. So yes, if you have money for Kelce, go for it. I'm personally not going to. Mark Andrews, if you're playing Tyler Huntley, we've seen in the past where Huntley just loves Mark Andrews, so it's like the only reason I'd play him. But outside of that, not too excited about that. I'm probably just gonna save some money here. So yes, if you can afford the upper echelon, I would never have a problem with that. Anyway, so getting to more realistic plays. TJ Hawkinson, he was in Detroit. now in Minnesota, but back in Detroit playing in this game. I think he's fine. He gets about like 6 to 8 targets every single week. So just kind of a boring play, but he does get the volume. Freiermuth had some really nice chunk catches last week. Didn't kind of fizzled off near the end there. Didn't really do much, but he's always going to be a safe source of targets, averaging just under 7 on the season. I'm fine with that. I hate to not really say anything else, but there's just not much to it. It's just really whoever fits my build. And I'll be honest, the one I'm probably playing the most of is going to be the guy at the bottom here. Dalton Schultz, fine. The problem is just I really worry about a blowout in this game and how much run is Dalton Schultz going to get in the second half. If he doesn't score a touchdown or 2 in the first half, well, I definitely have my concerns there. David Njoku, he's had some pretty good games versus Cincy in the past, I believe. He did miss last week. Harrison Bryant. I keep falling to the Harrison Bryant trap whenever David Njoku happens to miss, and he just does not do anything. I think the one time he did do something, he got like a 1-yard touchdown, and that was it. So hopefully Njoku's back, because he's definitely the best tight end on this team. The guy's pretty talented. There's 6 targets per game, although he's not played a game with Deshaun Watson yet. And Brissett always seemed to kind of like funnel into the tight end position. So we'll see if it hurts Njoku or it doesn't. Hopefully Watson looks a bit more sharp. But if you're looking to stack this game up and you can't quite afford in Peoples-Jones or a Amari Cooper, Njoku could be that cheaper run back option at the tight end position that does not look that great. Then Greg Dulcich, probably going to be your chalk option this week, $3,400. Like I said, just a banked up wide receiver core, and they're going to be trailing this game. And if you're looking at how KC's performed versus tight ends this year, it's not bad. 11th versus the position, but they're 26th David versus the pass. And the ball's going to go somewhere in this offense. Judy might play, even if he does, though. I mean, Dulcich should get the targets. Had, I believe, a career-high fantasy point game last week with right around 14 in PPR scoring. And if you are stacking this game up for some, I don't really want to stack Mahomes and Kelsey, but they're going to be low owned, then you can run it back with a guy like Dulcich or Kendall Hinton at a very cheap price point, but I do think this is your cash game tight end as of right now. And then just to knock out the defense here, as I always say, just scroll to the bottom and find your first viable defense. And honestly, I think the Panthers at 22, I'm not playing the Texans, 31 point implied team total, thank you. But the Panthers defense, not the worst out there, facing Seattle. I know they've had a decent offense this year, and Geno Smith's looked pretty good. Then you have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Ken Walker, though, looking very, very questionable this week. But $2,200, it's not bad. Only 4-point dogs, 24-point implied team total. Jags versus Tennessee, maybe. I'd rather play the Steelers, though. Only a 17.5-point implied team total against them. They're at home. They're the favorites. 36.5-point over-under. I think the Steelers defense is probably your best bet of the week. And then really, all these other defenses are viable because these are where you're getting the lower implied team totals and the favorites. But as far as cheap defenses are concerned, Steelers, Panthers look the best to me to save some money. All right, so let's try to finish this lineup off. I'm not sure if we can fit Jefferson in, but we're going to have to find a cheap tight end. I like Dulcich at only $3,400. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not sure if I've ever heard the name be pronounced. Either way, I don't really care. It's not going to change his fantasy production. We're going to need cheap defense. I like the Steelers, but in this build, we're really going to have to save some money, so we're going to go all the way down to the Panthers. That leaves us $4,200 left for the last couple of spots. If we play Hinton at wide receiver, that leaves us $5K, which we can work with. I mean, there's not many great options, but I think we could get a Peoples-Jones in. So, yeah, you could definitely play Justin Jefferson in that build. That's really not that hard to go with. So you have the Jared Goff paired with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Right back with Justin Jefferson. You have some cheap plays mixed around them. Joe Mixon, Tony Pollard. Yeah, that's not a bad looking lineup. So if you replace Justin Jefferson with Adam Thielen, though, just to save some money and open up your lineup, I'll take those two out. We'll plug in the Steelers defense at $2,800. That leaves me just under $6K left. I really like Garrett Wilson, $5,900. So I'll plug him in. That leaves me $6,000 left for the last spot. And honestly, DeAndre Swift doesn't look like a bad play there. Isaiah Pacheco, those are guys we talked about. DJ Moore. So I'm not sure if this one looks a little bit better to me, but it does feel pretty good. So that one's just, you took out Jefferson, Kendall Hinton, and Peoples-Jones, replaced it with Thielen, Garrett Wilson, DeAndre Swift. Honestly, that feels a little bit better. But if you are playing Jefferson, you're just really chasing that ceiling game. But if you do look at what Thielen did versus Detroit earlier in the year, which I believe was, week 3, 8 targets, 6 catches, 18.1 fantasy points. I believe that was actually his second best game of the season. It was not like a crazy game, but at $4,000, you're just really not asking for much, and he's just getting targets consistently. Like I said earlier, I did one on the optimizer here to see who's popping the most as of right now. If you are someone that does build 150, please make sure you have your settings put in place, and you can get access to this optimizer. Link down below in the description. Very fair price point. I do have it for all the sports that I do cover. because right now I don't have any settings put in place, so it's probably not going to give us the most highly correlated lineups that you'd want for tournaments. So sometimes like a quarterback won't be paired with a wide receiver, so you have to make sure you put that in the settings, which you can do. And it looks like actually we just got the 150 to crunch as we are talking, so that's perfect timing. So let me pull up the players tab to see what players are getting plugged in the most. So that's a lot of Jared Goff. So it's always nice when the projections agree that, well, projections like Goff the most, and I like him the most as well. A lot of the tight end that we liked a lot, Mixon, Derrick Henry, very high on there. St. Brown, a lot of Laviska Shenault, which that sounds terrifying, probably just because there's not that many punt options. Kendall Hinton, though, I do like him. I like him a lot more than Shenault. C. Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Cowboys, which, yeah, I mean, the Cowboys defense would be the top defense of the week. Facing Houston, they're just expensive. So, yeah, not really too surprised at who's popping. Did we see Garrett Wilson? Yeah, not seeing much Garrett Wilson on there. So that's someone that I thought would pop more. Tony Pollard's also not popping as much as I thought he would. And it's probably just because there's so much Derrick Henry and Joe Mixon. So some of those things where you have to play around the exposures because sometimes they're not going to completely agree. And if you're playing cash games or something, like some players just, I think you guys get the idea. But yeah, I agree on most of it. Some things are a little bit off in my opinion, but I feel like we're pretty much in line. Also the teams, Detroit's popping the most, a lot of Denver, Dallas, Cincy, Tennessee, and Minnesota. Can't say I'm really too surprised about that. Detroit, Minnesota getting plugged in all the lineups there, Denver versus KC. That's really just because of some of the cheap plays in the Denver KC game. With that being said, guys, I think that'll be it for the video. So hope you did enjoy, and if you did, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. Check out the extra premium content in the comment section down below in the pinned comment or in the description of this video. With that being said, I wish you all the best of luck, and I'll see you all next time.